Hand of the day.
Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome to the Hand of the Day from the beautiful Palm Springs. Bringing you this one from one of my readers who is in the first hand of a tournament. All right, so very first hand, 50-100 blinds, 30,000 starting stack. Player he has no idea about. We have no reads on anybody. Opens to 250, 2 callers, and he calls in the big blind with 5-3 of spades. We go 4 ways to the flop. So I'm okay with defending here. You close the action. It's 150 more. You're very deep stacked. I'm fine with calling with this hand pre-flop. The flop is Jack-8-3 with 2 spades. So you flop a really good hand, bottom pair and a flush draw. You check. The original raiser bets 650. So he probably has something here at this point. That's like the first thing that's going through my mind. I mean, sometimes people c-bet here with nothing, like they just bet ace, king, or whatever. But generally, when it's 4 people in the pot and someone bets, and Jack-8-3 with a flush draw is likely to have connected with someone, I generally think that they have something. I generally think that they shouldn't be betting with nothing, so he probably has something at this point in the hand. Folds around to you, and you decide to make it 2,200 here, going for a pretty big size check raise. Now, I'm okay with a check raise here. It kind of sucks if you get 3-bet because you have to call, but in the first hand of a tournament, he's only going to be 3-betting you here with like a set of 8 jacks, a set of 8s, pretty much it. I think he's going to call with flush draws, he's going to call with overpairs, and so it's really unlikely you get 3-bet. For that reason, I'm okay with check raising the flop here. You kind of take control of the hand, and you put him to a really tough spot. I mean, even if he has 2 aces here, let's be honest, this is the first hand of the tournament. He's getting check raised from someone in the big blind who could have 2 pair or a set, whatever. It kind of sucks. So I like the check raise. I like being aggressive. You could plan to bluff some turns. Maybe like you get him to fold on a queen. Maybe he folds like an overpair or a jack. There are some good turns for you that you could bluff, and of course you can make a flush or 2 pair. So I'm okay with the check raise here. I'm also okay with check calling. You could really go both ways. And he decides to call the flop, so you guys go heads up to the turn. Turn is a beautiful card for you, a 3. So at this point, you know, your opponent is likely loving his hand if he has something like aces or ace-jack or whatever, because it's less likely you have a set at this point, and of course the flush or the straight didn't get there. So you go ahead and bet pot. You bet 4,700, which is a huge bet at this point. So at this point, you're repping basically like Jack-8, Jack-3, or quads or a full house. I mean, those are the only hands for value that you are really check raising the flop and potting the turn with, right? It's really unlikely that you have like even ace-jack at this point. It's almost too aggressive of a bet when you bet the size of the pot. So you're not repping much, and your opponent probably knows this, and he's like, you know, either thinking you have a straight draw, a flush draw, or like a boat pretty much at this point, or like I guess a 3 with spades. So it's really likely he's going to call here with all his overpairs, so I'm okay with betting the size of the pot here. I mean, I think it's sort of a tricky play. And if he does have an overpair, he's probably going to call again. He's going to fold all of his draws, though, when you bet the size of the pot, especially because the board is paired. So your opponent decides to call this turn, and when he calls this turn, I'm really, like, you know, going through a funnel process, eliminating a lot of the hands that he could have. Because of your bet size on the turn, I think that the only hands he really calls here with are strong jacks or overpairs. I think pretty much folds everything else. So you could really narrow his range down a lot just by the way you played this hand on the flop and your bet size on the turn. So it's important to keep in mind the types of hands that he could have as we go into a more complex situation on the river. The river comes an offsuit queen, so completing a straight, missing the flush. Now you go ahead and bet 12,700 here, which is pretty much, again, the size of the pot. It's a huge bet here, especially for the first hand of a tournament. You took a really aggressive line, check raising the flop and betting 3 times. So at this point, you're repping a straight, which you could have improved to a straight, or a boat. Then those are the really only hands that you have for value. Otherwise, you just missed a flush draw. When you bet the size of the pot here, you're really hoping that your opponent doesn't have a straight or a boat. I guess he could have 10. I guess he could have a straight. He could have like 10-9 of spades. So you're hoping he doesn't have a straight, and you're hoping he doesn't have a boat, and you're hoping that he calls with aces or kings. Those are really the only hands you get value from. I guess you get value from queen jack, but he might fold the turn with that hand. So And like ace jack, I think at this point, if he has that hand, or king jack, I think he's just going to let that one go on the river, simply because there's enough better hands that your opponent could have that he can call the river with, right? Like something like ace jack is really the worst hand your opponent could have, so he's really unlikely to call the river with that hand. So at this point, when you bet the size of the pot, you're eliminating a lot of hands from his range that he could proceed with, and you're hoping he makes a really big hero call with aces or kings when pretty much everything got there except the flush, right? So you would have to be bluffing with a missed flush draw here on the first hand of the tournament out of the big blind, which I just don't know how often people are going to do. I also don't know how often people are going to make big, huge calls like this on the first hand of the tournament, which maybe gives more credence to bluffing here if you did somehow have a magical bluff like 10-8 of spades, or like 10-7 of spades, or 9-7 of spades. Sure, maybe you could pot it here hoping your opponent folds an overpair. It is kind of risky to risk so many chips this early in a tournament when you really don't need to. So I think if your opponent has aces or kings here, he's going to fold. The reason I'm on a tangent about this is, like, when you bet the size of the pot here, it's not like a losing bet necessarily, but it just doesn't get you the most value, right? You're hoping your opponent makes a big call, which, as we discussed, I think is unlikely to happen. So I'd like to see a bet here that he can talk himself into a call with, convincing himself that you missed a flush draw. I'd like to see something like 5,800 here, half pot, whatever. He's always going to call that bet, and I think it's just a little bit more value of a bet for you. I think this is too awkward of a river to go full pot on. Maybe you could go full pot on like a deuce, where the straight draw and the flush draw missed, but the queen changes a lot of things because if your opponent has a jack, it's much harder for him to make a big call in the river. Even though the queen might not have changed a lot except for the straight draw, it's still just harder for him to talk himself into a big call, right? Because he doesn't really beat anything. So I'd like to see half pot bet from you on this river. As played, you bet pot, and now he shoves. So, you're getting a decent price because the pot's so big, you don't have to call that much more. You're getting a great price on the river, but what hands is your opponent shoving with? He might shove with a straight. He's definitely shoving with a boat, and you're hoping that he's shoving with bluffs. He's not shoving. You mentioned to me in the email that he could be shoving with aces or kings. Those are the only hands you beat. That is true, you beat those hands, but it's pretty much impossible that your opponent is shoving with two aces, right? Two aces is a borderline fold or a call. Shoving would be absolutely terrible. So if you're in a tournament where your opponents are shoving with hands that they're completely overplaying and they have no idea how to hand read, maybe you could talk yourself into a call here, right? If aces or kings are in their range and they might just be like maniac bluffing, or they're overvaluing hands, or they're going to shove queen jack for two pair or something like that because they just don't understand ranges, then maybe this is a call. But against an opponent that is playing correctly and he's going to fold aces or kings or maybe call with them and then only shove with straights or boats, then you're basically calling, hoping that your opponent is bluffing. So you have to look at the pot odds you're getting and figure out, hey, is my opponent bluffing often enough for me to justify calling here? So what hands could he be turning into a bluff? Is he turning like a jack into a bluff, trying to rep a full house? I mean, that's some really high level thinking, and I think that's pretty ambitious when you're getting a great price, you're repping a super strong hand. It's really unlikely you're bluffing yourself, and your opponent would trying to be getting you to fold what looks like an absolute monster. So I think when you add up all those things, it's really unlikely he's bluffing the first hand of the tournament when you're getting a great price. It looks like you have a monster. You still could be boated or have a straight here yourself. None of those hands that you're probably not going to fold any of those hands. And so I just think when you add all that up, it's really, really unlikely your opponent's folding. And because of that, I would probably let your hand go. Hero in the hand, he writes into me, he said he ended up tanking for a long time and ended up folding, but he would like my analysis on this. So that's what I think you should do. I think other than your bet size on the river, you played it fine. I think folding the river is good. And other than that, well played, my man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have hands you'd like me to review, feel free to send them over to me on alectrelli.com. You could click on submit your poker hands, and I'll take the best ones and feature them here on this channel. If you like this video, please subscribe to it, give it a thumbs up, and share it with someone you know. It helps me grow my channel, helps me put out more awesome free content for you guys as well. Hope you enjoyed this, and thanks a lot for watching, and that's it for the hand of the day. Happy New Year, everybody. Take it easy. Cheers.